Well, to start off, I'm happy to have you back.
I'm happy to be back, David.
Yeah, you're a gem when it comes to sitting down and having such a diverse conversation. I think I talked about this in the car, being able to sit down with somebody and talk on a really high intellectual level and then be able to see the human psychology side of it, I think adds a lot of depth to conversation and, our will for understanding.
Life is very interesting,
Yeah.
and there's a lot going on. And it's my belief we never quite know anybody else's story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like to give people backstories. My kids and I used to drive along the street, and we'd look at somebody on the street and go, "And that person over there lives in a 2-bedroom house, and they have a roommate," and then we make up this whole story about it.
Yeah.
But that's just a way of applying what you know about humanity.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of like the when you're driving and you always guess the next driver in the car,
Exactly, exactly.
and then knowing that you really don't know. Like you can make assumptions and you can paint a picture, but you really
Yep,
don't know.
exactly.
I think that comes a lot with I guess it needs to happen more when people are so quick to judge. It seems like everybody wants to get stuck in this believing, what they think about people. And if you don't have
Yeah,
that, if you don't have the capability to sit there and be like, you know what, I really don't know, and
and
I
that.
don't need
Yeah.
to know, but I can ask.
And that's what I think we need more of. And
Yeah,
I don't think you can even always ask. I think the assumption you should make is that people are doing the best they can. And that applies to people living on the street. It applies to your manager at work. It applies to a lot of people. It doesn't really matter what walk of life they're in, but everybody, and there's a saying going around, I know everybody has secret problems
yeah,
of some kind. And and by imagining positive things about people, I think you can change your attitude. So if you're always making fun stories about the people you meet or the people you see on the street, and I taught my kids that, and I think that with those fun stories, you can change your overall attitude to be not so suspicious. I think our genetics make us a little suspicious
yeah,
because genetically we're driven to protect the family as near as they can
right,
tell. So you want to do everything you can to keep your family from being threatened in any way. So if you see somebody on the street that's kind of dirty, maybe you see that as threatening. But if you also think about it, what a hard life that person may have had
right,
and how they may have been at the top of their success at some point and something bad happened to them.
yeah,
Or they may have been in an accident and been so hurt they can't support themselves. There's a lot of things that can happen to people.
yeah. I gotta think of that movie. Is it with Mel Gibson? Where yeah, he's kind of he's a transient, and then in the end you hear his story, or they finally figure out his story. And I think his family had
Hmm.
passed away or been taken or
Yeah, I
something.
don't know about that one.
Yeah, you never know. It- That's funny. I never thought of it that way, but I wonder if we're wired where fear overtakes our optimism sometimes as a survival.
It can, and you have to fight it if you want. If you want to be a different kind of person, you have to fight it.
Yeah,
But I haven't kept up with the genetic studies, but studies a while back showed that nature optimizes for survival of the species, not survival of this individual necessarily. And so the herd behavior to all pull together and protect your family, the behavior about not wanting to try new things because somebody always has to try the first fruit from that tree
yeah,
to find out if it's going to be edible or not. And a lot of times it's not. So somebody has to do that, but that's not necessarily good for the individual. It can be good for the species, though.
yeah. I like that analogy. Do you think that plays into why sports and politics end up having two teams against each other?
Hmm. Well, in a lot of places, that's not true. That
Yeah,
happens to be the European way of doing things, and that's what we know the most about. But there are certainly other cultures where that is not the way things are played. And if you look at one of the most popular games in Asia for a long time was what's like polo, where you're riding along on horses and hitting things and trying to move them around the field. And that was every person for themselves. That was not necessarily a team sport.
yeah,
So there are a lot of things, and if you look a lot at some of the native games, a lot of them are competing against yourself. And I think that's what I like to see. We always talked about personal best. They came up with that in about, I don't know, 1980 Olympics or someplace along in there. And I think that's an important thing to remember. Have I done my personal best today?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether I can run a 4-minute mile. Did I do my personal best? And I did that with my kids a lot. Okay, run to that tree and back. Okay, now do it again. And then we do it 5 days later. Okay, that's your personal best. You've got under 3 minutes for that run now. And I think that's what we should think about more.
Yeah.
Not um, because not everybody can be a piano player and an athlete
Yeah.
and a this and that and the other thing. But the team sports, I think hmm, I'm going to say it briefly and hope we move on. But
Yeah.
I think that religion has a lot to do with that. That religion, and not just any one religion, but religions in general tend to pit the people within the religion against the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And that leads to me against you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very poor model for humanity.
Yeah. That's interesting because with, well, I guess what you would call tribalism is it goes across, religion, and then like America. It's always baffled my brain. It's like the way people take sports, like the Super Bowl, so serious, and I can never figure out why. Like, what is it about that? It's
Yeah.
Football's a bunch of controlled chaos to me. I'm more of a baseball player where it's a little
Yeah.
bit more definitive.
Okay.
But people get so on there, this is my team, and they, bar fights start over this, and I'm like, how is it? What mechanism do we have in our, in our brains or our DNA that have driven us to get so competitive?
I
Or
think that's
support
part of
something
it
in
is
that sense?
capitalism.
Yeah,
And that by having an unfettered capitalist society, and everybody likes to believe they could be one of those people that's succeeding at the top.
mm-hmm.
And that's what the American dream is supposed to be about. Everybody can be that person.
Yeah,
But we can't all be that person.
right.
That is the truth is most of us will never be anything close to that person.
Yeah,
Most of us will have trouble even paying our rent every month.
right.
Certainly today anyway. But I think the capitalist notion, the idea, and we go back to Horatio Alger way back about the poor boy makes good stories and Dickens and all those, that there are stories out there that if you just work hard and you are a moral upright person, you will do well.
Yeah,
And then somewhere along the way we forgot that, okay, if you work hard, but we don't really care if you're moral and upright, but you're going to work hard and we're going to get where we want to be. That doesn't really how it works.
that's right.
It doesn't. There are people who work hard quite often do well, and quite often they don't do any better than they would have without relaxing. I think that's one of the differences between my boomer generation, with me at 73, and the millennials down below the millennials,
Mm-hmm.
because they have watched a lot of their parents and parents' friends not do well,
Yeah,
working their butts off
yeah.
and not
You can say
doing
ass on here.
okay, not doing very well, because it turns out that, and I know all kinds of people
Yeah,
who've worked hard, and so I think a lot of them have taken the attitude, well, I'm probably going to be in this situation in 30 years anyway. I might as well just enjoy it while I'm here.
right. I just read an article, was it yesterday or the day before, that was talking about how 1 in 5 CEOs are psychopaths. It's the same ratio in prisons.
The other, and it's more than 1 in 5 for famous generals. It's probably 1 in 1 for
Yeah,
for famous generals. And I did a study on that for a while. It's right around the time I was studying World War II and Hitler and all the people that worked with Hitler. And then I started looking at other generals that were involved. And when you look at the top generals, the people that were saying, yeah, you're going to go storm that beach, 90% of you are going to die, but that 10% will take the beach for us.
yeah,
And you have to be a psychopath to do that.
right.
And CEOs are a lot like that. They know that by cutting corners, people are going to get killed. People are going to get hurt by their product. People at the bottom, they do everything they can to keep them from being paid well so they can maximize the profits for the shareholders.
Yeah.
And that's what a company is for. That's what capitalism is about. But it's not good for everybody.
Right. Yeah. It's, I think Jordan Peterson talks about this, where it's like, if you took 2 people and their goal was to have power, the more morally valued person will always fail because their subconscious behavior will not allow them to break the rules or to destroy somebody else for their own power. And the person that's, let's say like morally deranged, they have no problem tearing
Well,
somebody
yeah,
down or
yeah.
playing these evil games to take power over other
We were
people.
just I was talking with somebody about this the other day, and it's a real dilemma for people in a more well-to-do country because most of our products come from countries where they have very few environmental laws and the people are paid very poorly, and a lot of them are exposed to very bad chemicals,
Hmm.
bad working conditions. I don't know the death rates, but they're way, way above what we see in this country. And yet in this country, everybody complains about OSHA and the unions and a lot of it. I think all that's great because it's kept us from being morally bankrupt companies.
Yeah.
So I think though, then you get into the whole dilemma. Okay, if we move that whole factory over here, then what happens to the people that used to work in it?
Yeah.
What now? Are they better off? No.
Yeah.
So I think that's a moral dilemma that does not have a solution today.
Right. That's one thing. I'm glad you brought that up because they talk about this has kind of been going around the internet lately is talking about getting into. There's a lot of positions that people get into in their life where there's no easy answer, and people will, let's say on social media, they'll see a post about a problem or something. Well, then their first thing they want to do is give their response or what
Yep.
they think
Yep.
that person should do. That's the correct thing. Do this. And most of our situations in life that are hard, there is no easy answer because
No.
somebody's going to get hurt, or you're going to have to make a sacrifice that goes against your values. And
Right.
and it's a thing that you don't know for a long time if it's the right choice. So it's really, really
And
hard.
you will never know. I
Yeah.
mean, there are things like, and they talk about mothers having extraordinary strength to save a child.
Yeah.
So, what if the mother doing that knows she's going to die doing it? Number one. Number two, she has 6 more kids at home.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
Yeah.
That is not a good answer, especially if she's a single mother.
Right.
That's a bad answer. So, Robert Heinlein, the famous science fiction writer from the old days, had a saying in one of his books is, it may be better to be a live jackal than a dead lion, but it's better yet to be a live lion.
Yeah.
So we should all look for, I think we should all look for the best course that we can live with. How am I going to feel about myself later if I do this? Not just what happens to other people, but have I thought about the implications of what I'm doing? I
Yeah.
think that's important.
Absolutely. Because when you make choices that go against your values, or if you're doing something that's against your, I would say, like your own psychology, that wears on you over time. And sometimes the longer you live, the more, it just chips away at your foundation.
And that's one of the reasons I kind of jumped out of engineering for quite a while, is because one of the premises today, and I see Google doing it now, everybody has to come back to work and work 60 hours a week, or Facebook or anybody. 60 hours a week is not profitable. And they've proven it over and over again that people don't get any more productivity in 60 hours than they do in 40 hours because they're tired. And they also have no social life. So they have to socialize at work. So they stand around and talk a little bit more. And it's not noticeable on a day-to-day basis, but it is more.
Yeah.
And they don't get more done. They're tired. They don't have a life outside. They don't have a way to go grocery shopping and get their laundry done. It's not a sustainable activity.
Yeah.
And yet that's what American business drives for. And when I was a manager, I couldn't do that to people. I can't tell them to work 60 hours a week. I don't want to work 60 hours.
You're right. Yeah. If you're doing that, you're there for the wrong reasons. I mean, we go to work to provide for your family because your family's, the most valuable thing to you. And in turn, your time with your family, you spend more time with them, you get the value out of that. You're more likely to go to work a happier, more productive individual because you're supplementing, bi-directional.
Right.
And I think I will say that's one thing that I've been very blessed with my career so far, with what I'm doing is they understand that. And
That's good.
And when you get to that point or you work for a company that does that, it's, you can feel it.
It's destructive, and it
Yeah.
affects your sleep. It affects your health, and it has long-term effects on your health and sleep.
Right.
I mean, there are things that you can't reverse just because you quit.
Yeah. Yeah, short-term stress can have long-term,
Hmm.
yeah, implications. Uh, I think that's very common right now, especially with the younger generations. I think right now are facing that it's taking more hours to get by, and so a lot less people are having kids, and a lot, and
Yeah,
you
and
know,
buying houses and all the other and fancy cars and all the other things we kind of took for granted that were going to be a goal when I was going to college. I
yeah,
knew that I could buy a car. I knew that I was going to be able to buy a house. I knew that I would be able to afford a family. And I did, and it was good.
yeah,
But you look at it today, you can't even get through college on your own anymore. And I did that. I put myself through college with a very, very low amount of government 3% loans. So,
yeah. I remember you saying that. We just I was just talking about that the other day. How you also talked about how you had people that helped you, and so many people are
yeah,
afraid to ask for help. Maybe they're too prideful or something, but really, we're all in this together, and people like to help. There's a lot of value.
they do.
It's very self-fulfilling to help other people,
Yeah.
and
And
brings a lot of,
And you don't always have to ask. Sometimes you just say, "Yes, I'll accept that help."
yeah,
And that's something that people can do for you, and they like doing that. And I was just recently went grocery shopping in my wheelchair, which I use periodically because I just can't walk very well sometimes. And I went to the dollar store in Winco, and I will tell you what, there were nice people everywhere. I had trouble
yeah.
reaching something. They helped me. I had trouble getting through I can't go through most doors by myself. They came over and opened the door for me. They reached things down from shelves. They reached across and did this and that for me. It was wonderful. I
I
bet
love
you at
hearing
least
that.
a dozen people helped me in an hour and a half.
I love hearing that.
And I didn't ask for any of it.
Yeah.
They just offered, and I was able to say yes
Oh, I love
because I
hearing
know
that.
how now.
Yeah. Do you think this is kind of a crazy question?
Yeah, go for it.
Do you see it as often in the wintertime as you do in the springtime when the
Oh,
weather's better?
I think I do.
Yeah.
I think sometimes even more because I've had a lot of people offer to help me walk across an icy sidewalk or
Yeah.
something. So I think, yeah, people are very and people worry about me in the winter. Oh my gosh, I've got a
Yeah.
whole group of young people that I do crochet and knitting with, and they're like, we get to the library, and if it's winter and it's cold outside, and Dial-A-Ride hasn't picked me up in the first 10 minutes of their 30-minute window, they all kind of get, Jane, we're not leaving
Yeah.
until your ride gets here. We'll take you home if we have to. And I keep telling, no, they'll always be here. They have always come to pick. They have never missed it. No,
Yeah.
we're staying. We're staying.
I like that. It goes back to what we were talking about
Yeah,
earlier about how you're looking out for your species or each other
yeah.
as a whole. I like that.
And they're just nice people.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a lot of nice people. That's one thing I wish people, when I visit with people, and some people will talk about, I hate people. And I'm like, you just haven't been around the right ones, or you haven't put yourself in enough positions because there's a lot of nice people out there.
But now we have to go back to what we were thinking earlier is the story you put with the people. If
Yeah.
somebody gives you a short answer, and like you ask a question and they just say yes and walk away, okay, there's two ways you can take that. And we know what they are. One of them is they're busy and distracted and they've done the best they can for us at that moment. The other part of that, though, is they didn't want to talk to me. They are snobby people. They were just, I
Yeah.
didn't think I was important enough. So you have to, again, you have to get your head around that piece.
I like that because one of those you're looking outward, and the
Yeah.
other one you're looking inward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. We were talking about capitalism and politics a little bit, or team, I guess, tribalism. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of information out there, or I would say dialogue about NASA and politics being involved. Did you go through anything with NASA where politics played a damaging role that you experienced?
Challenger.
The Challenger?
So everything about NASA was political all the time. And I knew that going in because I had been working with the L5 Society and trying to get people more interested in supporting NASA and supporting the space program and space exploration in general. And people, when you talk to them, are always like, "Oh yeah, I love what NASA does. I love it. I love it." And then you give them a questionnaire. Here are 20 things that the government funds. NASA gets less than 1% of the budget.
Yeah.
It's a very small piece of it. But without saying that, people will put NASA as the last thing to fund because there are more important things. They want to fund social systems. They want to fund defense. They want to fund agriculture. There's a lot of science, health research. There's a lot of things people want to fund. And NASA just comes quite a bit at the bottom.
Yeah.
And it always has, and it probably always will. So then you get into the politics. When I got there, we were a fairly small group of about a dozen people, I think, in propellants and life support. And we did what we could, but there was a lot of maintenance that probably wasn't being kept up with across the Space Center. The funding wasn't there. Anytime NASA wants to fund something, they have to cut money from something else. And that's been true since Apollo, since 1969, probably.
Yeah.
And that's was very true for a while there because they were trying to fund the space station. So Challenger went down, and then we had to go back and look at everything to see where there were things that should have been taken care of that didn't get taken care of. And it was the return to flight program is what we called it. And we found a lot of things that we got additional money for. We got additional attention for them. And we felt really good when it was done, that things were in good shape.
Yeah.
And then the budget for that kind of stuff just dropped down. The group I started out 12 people. It went up to 32 when I was just before I left as manager of that group. And I heard that 2 years later, it was down to 3 people.
Oh, that's too
You
bad.
can't do that. You just can't do that.
Right.
And that's politics. And it's the politics of trying to fund the things that NASA wants to do. People do not, there is no way with the Congress we have, any Congress we've ever had, to fund a 10-year program. And all NASA programs need to be a 10-year
Right.
program. You cannot design a spacecraft and get it built and get it launched and get it to someplace in less than 10 years. It just isn't done.
Yeah.
And so, I don't think it's a bad thing that we're going to a lot more commercial ventures in space because I think they have a better ability for long-term funding, especially the ones that are up front. We used to talk about having a lottery and where people could buy money. In fact, somebody tried to start a company where you bought shares in a long-term space development program that worked on small things until it got up to big enough to be putting a habitat in space. And the SEC the Securities and Exchange Commission would not let them do it because there was no return on the investment. The return on the investment was more than 10 years out.
Right.
And so that is not legal. Right. So NASA has the same problem. There's just no way to fund it.
Yeah. It's incredible to me that they talk about NASA, like the Challenger. People say, oh, well, it was about money. Like they were forcing the launch for money. Well, how would have, there's no way NASA was going to get more money by launching that at that time.
The president was supposed to be there for that launch.
Yeah. That was Reagan. Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
86.
80, whatever.
Yeah.
Whoever the president was.
Right.
And the president was supposed to be there, and they wanted, and anybody who's ever seen a launch changes their mind about launches.
Oh, yeah.
They're so spectacular. If you can be, and sitting in the visitors viewing center, you're right there. You can feel it rumble.
Oh, yeah. I've been to one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember what year it was in the 90s. I was there.
Yeah.
You were probably working. You were probably working there.
I
when I was
probably
there.
was,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
I just got goosebumps. It's remarkable.
It is absolutely remarkable.
That's one thing where you and I have kind of paralleled in life is that we both started on a farm.
Yeah.
And then you end up going down into Florida and seeing, the
All this
space.
technology stuff. Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
It's wild.
It's amazing what contrast does.
It is. Well, so one I thought of the other day, I was listening to a book about Krakatoa, and one of the things that came up on it is when the first theory of plate tectonics was published, which is the theory that different plates are pushing together and creating mountains and volcanoes and other things in the Earth's crust. That's within my lifetime.
Yeah.
How can that be? How is that even possible?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When you look back on your lifetime, is it like how would you describe the advancements in technology. Like, do you ever have those moments where you just sit there and be like, this is,
Oh, all the time.
and you're a part of it? That's what, isn't that
Yeah,
cool?
it is really cool, and all the time. And I read science fiction since I was, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old. I love science fiction, and have always been these predictions of what life's going to be like, and some of them have been good. We got Dick Tracy and the Apple Watch and things like that. But on the other hand, we didn't even begin to predict what was really going to happen. Nobody thought that a mainframe was going to be this big.
Yeah.
Nobody predicted that. So there's a lot of things that just amaze me that way. And every once in a while, it still catches me by surprise somewhere. And I was looking up recently for a program I was on at the NorwestCon, the science fiction convention, and they wanted to talk about all the planetary exploration. And when I started looking at that list, I was stunned by how much is going on. There's like 10 or 12 missions going to Mars. There's about a half a dozen missions going to asteroids. I think there are another dozen missions going to Jupiter. There's about a dozen different entities trying to land on the moon or orbit the moon and get more
Yeah.
information. It's stunning.
In 60 years, we
Yeah,
went,
yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible.
I mean, I remember Sputnik. I remember hearing Sputnik. I was 5 years old.
yeah.
And then Echo when we launched our first. And then, Alan Shepard and John Glenn and
Yeah.
Gemini and all the other programs. And yeah, look at us today.
I mean, look at Voyager. We were, you and I
Oh,
were just talking about
Voyager's still
Voyager.
running. I know, 40 years later. Oh my gosh. Because
Billions of miles.
I was telling you about the first time that when we had the biggest screen, which was not really a TV in those days, but we had a way to project onto it. And so people would come over to our house in Denver to watch the Voyager flybys. And we had these big parties and people
Yeah.
bought drinks and everything. And we had big celebrations and cheered every time a picture came in. But the pictures are coming up on the screen, boop, 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 boop. And it's just a little bit bigger, a little bit big, pixel by pixel,
Yeah.
until all of a sudden there's this big picture and everybody's going, oh, and it was really cool.
Yeah. Do you think we've gotten desensitized to space exploration?
I would say so. I mean, SpaceX is doing their best to make it more exciting for people. There's still a lot of people who are very interested in it. I did the panels at NorwestCon. We had a pretty high attendance at all those panels. I was on 6 different ones about different things about space programs, and we got good attendance. And so there's a class of people, a group of people that are very interested and follow all the stuff and want to keep up with the latest things. There's also a lot of people who are like, yeah, Elon did it again, didn't he? Huh?
Yeah.
And I can see why that's true. He's doing things that are interesting. SpaceX is interesting, and they've had some real successes and they've had some real disasters.
Yeah.
But is it exciting in terms of space exploration? Well, yeah, the chopsticks were. Landing
Yeah.
on a platform was.
Yeah.
There's some things that are pretty dang cool.
Yeah.
And and that's why I look mostly at the outer planets, Mars, the moon, the explorations there. We're finding some very basic information about the universe we live in, and looking at exoplanets, which are planets around stars that may be, lights, many, many light years away.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty interesting too. It's going to tell us more.
Do you, when you, all your time paying attention to space, have you ever seen any evidence that there could be life on another planet?
So there is still some information from Mars that says maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. The Europa Clipper probe that's going to go land on Europa. I think it's a Clipper that's going to land. Anyway, they're going to drill down into the ice. There's a good chance that the conditions under the ice on Europa are conducive to life. And what kind of life, we don't know.
Yeah.
And how long has it been there? We'll find out. There's also an exoplanet that they just found out had, I think it was sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. And the only source of maybe it's trioxide. The only source of that chemical on Earth is from the deep underwater vents,
Oh,
where there's life,
yeah.
from the life at the deep vents in the ocean. So maybe And that's kind of what the scientists who found it said. And when they published it's maybe, it's not proof, but maybe.
Yeah.
So there are possibilities. I'm not, there's, boy, we always get into these big discussions with people I know about, is there life in the universe at all?
Yeah.
Other life. And the chances, I can't remember who said it now, but the chances that there is another civilization somewhere in the universe capable of communicating with us and wanting to communicate with other life forms is fairly small because it's a very, very big place. And so
Yeah.
if you're one in a million planets and there are 100 billion planets, I don't know where that puts you, but we tend to forget that civilizations have lifespans,
Yeah.
and whether human civilization has a lifspan, we don't know right now.
Right.
We're not at the end. We're quite a ways from the beginning, but in terms of galactic years, we're not very far from the beginning.
Right.
We're like this close when it's this big.
Yeah.
So,
So just probability of a lifespan of any civilization even matching up with the same time as ours to be in existence
yeah.
is
And even if we get something from them, by
yeah.
the time we send something back, because we're talking 40 years
Yeah.
to get a communication one way. So 80 years from now, 80 years from when they sent it, and that
Yeah.
many billions of way, well, yeah, probably, but then we don't know enough.
Yeah.
I always like the science fiction that has a lot of different kinds of civilizations, and there's some very creative writers out there
Yeah.
that give very credible creatures that have different kinds of life cycles than we do. So
Yeah.
that may be what we just don't know how to look for what we're looking for.
Also, I also think too, like obviously aliens are a big discussion with people, this fascination. And it's like we have this fascination where we don't want to be alone. I can't
We're
figure
not
out
alone.
with as far as with
We
each
have
other.
aliens right here on Earth.
Yeah.
We have whales. We have dolphins.
Yeah.
We don't know how many other creatures. Certainly some of the apes appear to have pretty sophisticated thinking.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
David Brin, friend of mine, wrote a book called, his first one was called Star Tide Rising. Oh, which I have to brag about. He was visiting in our house while he was getting that book published, and my daughter got a first edition paperback signed copy of it.
Oh, cool.
It's pretty cool. Anyway, Star Tide Rising talks about dolphins and chimps with enhanced intelligence going out on exploration with humans. But the idea that just a little nudge or the ability to speak with them, we still don't really know what whales and dolphins are saying.
Yeah.
We don't know all the ways. We're just finding out. One of the things that really bothers me about anthropology, and it's that we're getting out of it, we're not out of it yet, is the fact that, and it's just terrible to say, but European white men decided what everybody was doing in anthropology. They decided that if it was a matriarchal society, it was on its way out. That wasn't a real society. They decided that they never, for years and years, they didn't recognize any kind of domestic arts as technology, when there's a good chance that technology was driven by domestic arts,
Mm-hmm.
that the spinning and weaving and sewing things together was what that's why you made needles. Where are you going to get a needle from? You have to make it. How are you going to sew things together? You got to do some
Yeah.
of this stuff. So there's a good, and weaving, there's a theory out there that weavers may have been the first mathematicians.
Oh, yeah.
And if you think about it, they have, in weaving, you have a certain number of threads that go one way and a certain number the other way, and you have patterns you want to put in it. And the patterns may or may not repeat. But if you want a repeat pattern, you have to understand how this many this way and this many this way turn into a pattern with the colors that you're using. And some of them don't even use colors. There's a lot of patterns that don't use colors. And they did it. And we have evidence back 5,000 years ago that they were doing it.
Yeah.
Good evidence that they were doing it 5,000 years ago. So that kind of predates most of the mathematics we know about.
Right. It's like it's mathematics in practice,
Yes.
and you wonder if it was reverse engineered. Because that wasn't their intent, right? It was
Well, I think that they had to do it in their heads. I
Yeah.
think that they did it as a visual problem in their heads. And some people that do different kinds of mathematics do it that way as a visual problem. So once you start doing it as a visual problem, maybe you started drawing it in the dirt or the clay or something. We have no record of anything like that, but who knows where it really went.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of other domestic, like they've been surprised that what they're finding is shopping lists in Sumerian stuff. Okay, why not?
Yeah.
If you want to go to the market and you're sending your daughter-in-law who's not very bright off to the market, maybe you wrote out a shopping list for her. Then they found things like tax counting, and they found one was tax avoidance, how to avoid taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, so these are really basic domestic problems. These are not high end. We're looking at the sky and calculating
Yeah.
the stars and things. So I
Do you,
think we need to look more at that.
do you think, I love what you're talking about with how Western European white men, the scholars, we'll call them, they've put a capsule around, I think, understanding or the attempts to understand it. And they push these, I would say, what would you call them? Like freelance, what would you call them? They're not, obviously they're not scientists, but they're curious minds that are out here trying to figure things out, and it's normally things that can't be explained, like the pyramids. Like
Hmm.
people cannot figure out how we built the pyramids, and it's created this fascination amongst authors and other people that come from
Yeah,
all these different backgrounds. And do you think that's what we need? Is you need people that sometimes that aren't in the system to
we
look at
do.
the
We do.
system?
And there are, oh gosh, biologists, anthropologists, archaeologists are now teaming together to take a new look at some of the information we have and some of the pieces we have to try and come up with a different understanding of them.
Yeah.
So there's, I think, and I can't remember what they actually called them to begin with. It's a round stone with a hole in it. And for a long time, and they tend to be all about the same size. And for a long time, I think they thought they were some kind of weights for fishing or nets or something. Turns out, and then they thought they were for spinning. Turns out they're weaving weights, but nobody who looked at them had ever seen anybody weave. So they had no idea. So now, when we're integrating people from different cultures, the other thing about the white European man too is it was all Christian for one thing,
Yeah.
and women and people of color were all chattels, and they had no brains. The reason they were chattels is because they couldn't think for themselves. So anything that had to do, they automatically made assumptions even when they came into the very sophisticated Native American societies on the East Coast. They made an assumption that they were all savages and treated them like savages, and they never did get over that. I mean, we still haven't gotten over some of it. So I think that seeing people from different disciplines working together to take a different look at some of these things is giving us whole new information.
Yeah. I like that's one thing there's a lot of value in the podcast world and the new independent media is you're able to not only are people building a very large network because the algorithms are aligning these people, all across the globe that have similar
Yeah.
interests, and all of a sudden they're getting fed their content. Now they're actually getting together and going on, educational study trips and things like that together
Yeah.
and having the conversations again and looking at it um, outside of the, what do they call them? Not the educators, but the scholars,
Yeah.
that have held the lock and key on this stuff for so
Yeah.
long. And now they've kind of worked their way around it. And I think
They have.
it's been, I can say that that's been great for my generation is because, you don't want to be suppressed by what they're telling you. You don't want to be, it's
No.
not good for you
Right.
it's not good for a society, I don't think, to get trapped.
No, it is not good for a society. The other part that comes with it that you haven't, I think but you haven't explicitly said is that you can listen to other people's podcasts. So you can go completely outside your discipline. So somebody who's working in anthropology may have a hobby of weaving. So now they
Yeah.
bring those two pieces together. Somebody who's working in archaeology may think mathematics is interesting, so they start listening to a podcast about science or mathematics or something. So I think the ability to get a layman's understanding of different topics is very important too.
Yeah. Have you found have you found any new fascinations since the internet that you've really dug into?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I'm much more able to keep up with everything that happens around the world in space. And I can go in and read some pretty technical stuff on it, or I can just read some top level about this is the list of all the launches. What I used to do in the old days, all the news, Aviation Weekly, I used to get that. And all the news was a week to a month behind. And then I put together a newsletter for the L5 Society chapter that I ran in Denver, and I literally clipped and pasted. I would go into the magazine and cut out an article
Yeah.
and paste it on a piece of paper and copy that and give it to other people with full information on where it came from. So nobody copyright got
Yeah.
problems. But big difference. Now I can go look up all that stuff. I was gosh, I just get interested in so many things like making. I'm very crafty. I like doing a lot of crafts. I can go out and start any kind of craft I want.
Yeah.
And there's a website for I make what's called tablet woven bands, and they're like think of it like a guitar strap, right? So there's a website out there I can go to that is run by. Do you want to stop for a minute?
No, you're okay.
Okay.
The dog likes to come in.
Uh,
It's Mav.
Okay. So there's a website called Twisted Threads, and I can go in there and just put in what kind of pattern I want. I want to make one with ducks on it. And then it does the ducks for me. And I say, well, I want to make it with green and pink and orange.
Yeah.
And then it shows me what that would look like too. And then it tells me how to thread for it and how often to turn the cards. I'm like stunned by that.
Isn't that remarkable?
It's all free.
Yeah.
You know, this is like fabulous stuff. So, and outside of that, when I was looking at for the panels, I was doing some information on one of them was the top 5 space companies in the next 5 years. And I went and looked for the top 5, and you get the kind of the usual suspects. But then I was, okay, I want to know about who's the biggest in space habitats right now. And the biggest was Gilmore Space. Oh, but they disbanded. And wait, but they still have a habitat attached to the space station. It's been there since 2016. It's still doing fine. They use it for space station work. And there's another couple of them floating out in orbit. Oh, but 3 of the guys from Gilmore Space went off and started their own companies, and they are doing this. So then I can maybe those guys are going to be big. Maybe,
Yeah.
So I can go look up stuff like that just fascinates me. And the rabbit holes are deep,
Yeah.
very deep.
I like, people have this fear of AI, and I'm glad that I think people have come on to quickly embrace it. And I think one thing I truly love about it is I think it's challenging the human brain to hit its capacity limits because you're able
Yeah.
to absorb so much so fast. And I just feel that if people are out there getting the information where we can have a computer you can ask a ChatGPT or any AI platform that gives you information a quick question. Well, it doesn't just give you the answer to your question. It'll give you what
Related stuff.
it'll give you that, and then it'll give you a bunch of related information and topics that, hey, you might be interested in this too. And I think it's
Yeah.
really helping us develop intellectually.
I hope it's also helping us pay attention to what it's telling us, because I have found errors in every scientific query I've made.
Oh,
I mean, every single one.
yeah.
And major errors in many cases where it mistranslates a word, it misuses a word, it takes information from a bad source.
Right.
It doesn't know any better than that. So I use it to get an idea what's going on, but then I go track down the sources.
Yeah, I like that. If you're the type of individual that understands the theory of what you're inquiring about, you're probably like someone like you. If you were looking up chemical engineering or anything with space, you'd be able to be like, yeah, this isn't right. Where a lot of people aren't able to do that.
And that's what I worry
something-
about with
could see
it,
that.
because with AI, because I know that we have a very deep bias in the algorithms that present us information already on the internet. And I talked a little bit on the way over here about bias.
Yeah.
And the bias in information is very strong. I mean, I know that I get articles in the news, especially in things like Google News, that match and align with what I've read before, first of all. And second of all, what it finds out about me in other ways too. I mean, we all have that time when a friend of ours decides to buy a special can opener, and all 50 of us get ads for that can opener.
Yeah.
So they know they know what they're doing. They know how you're connected. There's no doubt about that.
Isn't
And the
that wild?
algorithm feeds that. So those algorithms can also make persons out of us that are not as good as we could be, because it gives us a bias towards what do they call it? The believing what you already think you know. So if I think that, for instance, the space landing was a fake, and I have looked that up 50 times already, and I read articles about Roswell and fakes about the moon,
Yeah.
then I'm likely to only get that information from AI.
Right.
I'm not going to get good information. So I don't like the bias that the algorithms put into our searches. It was bad before AI. I hope AI doesn't make it worse. I know people are working on that and trying it, but it behooves us all to go out and look up things that we think are like, not just say, okay, the moon thing is a fake. Go find out why they believe it, and then go find out if somebody has refuted that, which is what happened. Somebody
Yes.
has very carefully, item by item, said this is why it's not true.
Yeah. That's one thing. Yeah, we talked about it on the way over here, but things like, you know, the Challenger, clip that we had with you went viral because everybody's refuting it. Oh, they weren't on the Challenger. They went out the hatch, and they they lived. So people have gone out and made these stories like, oh, they were still alive teaching here and they had twins, and then we have people object the moon landing. We didn't really land on the moon.
Right.
And what well, I guess the first question I'd have for you is what evidence have you seen at the Space Center? Not only you lived there, it was on your birthday, the
Yeah.
Challenger explosion, which
Yeah.
horrible. I mean,
It was a big thing for me.
yeah, it's huge for you. And people they will not take in your experience because they have this something in their thought process that blocks them off from it being real to them. Why do you think that is?
Whoa. So there are people who are wary of anything scientific or engineering related. And we're seeing that now with some of the health sciences, the big fluoride debate that's going on and has been going on for years and years and years. We see it in drug approvals. We see it in a lot of other places. And there is a fairly widespread theory that people don't believe science anymore because they feel they've been let down by science. And doctors are another big one, that doctors can't solve everything. But when they can't solve something, people get really upset about it. They don't think, well, there isn't anything that can solve that problem. Like
Yeah.
I'm working right now with health issues. Pretty sure none of those can be solved. They're all like related to my old age and
Yeah.
my well-used body. And so the idea that the doctor can solve everything that happens to me just isn't true. But people want to believe that it can. And they want to believe when science says you shouldn't be doing that. And really, nutritionally, we have been bombarded with weird science. Okay, you shouldn't eat carbs. You should eat carbs. You shouldn't eat protein. You need to eat protein. You're not getting enough protein. Have some more salt. No, don't eat salt. And it goes round and round and round.
Yeah.
And it's very confusing. And part of that is a lot of that has to do with the way the media presents it.
Right.
The rest of it has to do with people who need to be right. So you have somebody who's working in nutrition, they're recommending diets to people in a hospital. They feel the reason they're doing it is they feel like they know what they're doing. So they have a need to know what they're doing. And I think that need to know is then communicated through the news into big headlines
Yeah.
that make us distrust science and technology.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very predictable effect of the way we live. I don't know how you solve it, but that's why I think you get some of those things. There's a lot of people that think, okay, well, they can't even fix my pump. I'm going to have to throw it away.
Yeah,
They can't be sending people to the moon if they can't even fix the dang pump.
right.
So, yeah, you got to think about that.
Yeah, I know with the Challenger explosion, I sat down and visited with you, which you were there. It was, and you were very involved in it. And then I went down to Texas and sat with Nolan Talley, who he trained the astronauts, some of them, and one of
Mm,
them was his friend, you
yeah.
know, and it was very emotional. I read the transcript, through the
I
launch, and it was
I
one of the
still
most emotional
I
things I've
cry
ever
every
read.
time
Yeah.
I hear it. I've
Oh, it was
listened to it
awful.
over and over. I cry every time.
Yeah, and I don't understand. I can't understand why. It's almost I always wonder if it's people don't want to believe in tragedy. Like they want to objectively like we can't. It's very hard for humans to tragedy is very hard. So maybe there's a mechanism we have where it's like if I can explain my way out of this tragedy since it didn't affect me personally, I would feel better or something. I don't know what it is, but I just have had a hard time with people arguing it now that I've met people that were directly involved. They have very strong evidence. And then there was families involved, and it's very sad with that one. But then there's the moon landing where it's like people want to rewrite history maybe because there's power in it or they want to be fooled because then they can play like, hey, we were fooled. And then if you're
Mm,
fooled by the government or NASA or whoever it is or the media, then you don't have to hold yourself accountable if, to things. If you say, oh, well, I was fooled.
well, you always want to be, and most people, we talked a little bit about this. Everybody wants to be smarter about something. They want to be better at something.
Yeah.
So if you can convince yourself that you know more about Challenger than that weird chick sitting on the video, well, maybe you just feel pretty good about yourself if you do that, and that's okay. That we all do some of that.
Maybe it's that simple.
I
Maybe
think
that's
it
what it
is.
is.
I think it is that simple that people want because everybody and the people who are unhappiest are those who can't name anything they feel that they're good at, right?
Yeah. That's
And
sad to think about, isn't
it
it?
is very sad to think about because it's always been my belief that everybody's good at something. I mean,
Right.
I can't do drafting. I worked with drafters all my life, and they can draw lines and curves and things that are impossible for me to even imagine doing. Um, and people who work and are happy in customer service all day long.
Yeah.
How hard is that? That's
Yeah.
got to be really hard. Nurses, doctors, engineers, everybody, welders, really, you have no idea. I
Yeah.
mean, most people have no idea how much their life depends on good welding
Yeah.
and all their utilities and everything they use all the time. There have to be some people who really know what they're doing out there.
It's
Um,
what do you remember the name of the theory that talks about like I forget the basis of it is if you were to take 100 people and give them 100 tasks across the spectrum of accomplishments, it very rarely would the same person be good. I think it's at more than 5 of them.
I don't know that. I don't remember the name of that theory, but I believe that. I
Yeah.
mean, there's just if you look at the things that have to be done in daily life, hardly any, and a lot of people that do things very, very well. Like my mother, and my mother always said she wanted to put it on her resume when she went back to work is she could get 6 kids up and get them on the bus with lunches every morning
Yeah.
in a very short amount of time. And she could get all their clothes done and feed them and grow the garden. And there's all these things that people do that we don't see as high end skills, but by golly, they are.
Oh yeah.
So I think that people think if they read enough that they will become knowledgeable. But then you get the bias of what are you actually reading? I mean, you go to Roswell, you can almost convince yourself there was some. Oh, I was just in. I got to tell the story. I was
Yeah.
just in Seattle. Did you know that Seattle area was the first site of a UFO?
No.
Oh my gosh, I didn't either. So there was some guys out fishing in a lake there. I think Lake Washington it was.
Okay.
A guy and his son, and they saw something coming down, and this debris, hot metal debris, came down around them, and they picked up some of it and saved some of it and took it back, and they think it came from and then somebody else saw a saucer, what we would call a saucer today,
Yeah.
north of that, like up by Bellingham, and they named it a flying saucer. This was in 1947, before Roswell. And so the name flying saucer came from somebody in Washington
Oh, isn't
state.
that something?
And here we are. So anyway, I saw this big display about it, and you can call and leave a message for the aliens. And of course, I had to do that.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting, though, because again, oh, and then the whole story goes on. So the Army or the Air Force sent in a B-29 to pick up the debris and take it somewhere to look at it. And the B-29 took off with the debris and crashed and destroyed everything. The two pilots were killed.
Oh,
So,
wow.
oh man, the aliens did not want us to look at their stuff, did they?
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. So there's a lot of ways you can put that story together.
Yeah.
And I think so if you went out and looked for stories about aliens or Bigfoot, and Bigfoot's, it's getting harder and harder to justify Bigfoot.
Well, I actually have something about Bigfoot.
Wait, go
Go
for
ahead.
it.
Well, so my grandma, I hope I tell this right. My grandma's here. She would tell you. My grandma's best friend grew up. Her name was Rosemary. Actually, she lived here for a while. I think it was her husband's, Les Patterson was his name. I think it was his brother or his cousin was the Patterson in the video. And the Gimlin family is from where I'm from.
Oh,
So that's the big thing. They go up there and look for it, but
yeah.
it's fake. I mean, I think.
Well, I mean,
and nowadays you'd be
but
able
it's
to
real
find
for
them.
some people.
Yeah,
I mean, it's real for some people.
Oh, what do they say? There's reality in substance, right?
Mhm.
I just heard that the other day, and I'd never thought of it that way. Like with Santa Claus, or if you're religious, God, or a Bigfoot, or anything like that. There is actually, and it was one of the coolest things I'd heard, that there's reality in substance to things. Like if you and I are here discussing it, then there's some sort of reality to it.
Right. And the more we discuss it, the more we give people ideas to think about it themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And some of those people are, maybe 90% of the people are going to go, oh, yeah, there's no UFOs right now. And another 10 to 50% or whatever the number is are going to go, oh, yeah, yeah.
It's crazy to think about these stories from the 40s.
Yeah.
Like those ones are the most, because, Hollywood wasn't as developed then. Military technology wasn't as developed then. And I think there was a sighting in France in the early 1900s too, or mid 1900s, that was very similar. And then there was one, I think, in Africa, and the kids drew it, and it was a saucer type. And so these were happening when telecommunication was very low.
Right.
The global network was low.
Right.
And they're very similar. And I think that's so interesting. But when I was in middle school, I was over by Mount Rainier by Alder Lake, and we were sleeping in my buddy's backyard, and something came over the top of us that was dead silent, and it had a spotlight. I'll never forget it. And we were freaking out.
Oh, yeah.
Well, now I'm like, it was probably a drone or something out of Fort Lewis.
It was something, yeah.
Yeah, but back then.
Well, and even back in the 40s, even today, looking back to try and imagine what technology could have had that happen, pretty hard to imagine that even. So people, there's stories out there.
Yeah.
And you can go a lot of different ways with those stories.
Yeah. Do you think we're talking also about, I know you're big into space, and I'm sure your imagination has played into a lot of, I guess, space exploration and expansion.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would be the most feasible, I would say, advancement in space that we could come up with in the next 2 decades?
Oh man, see, you're just playing into my story here.
Yeah.
So we just did a panel on what is the next big new thing in space.
Yeah.
And one of them is the one that I pick is that you have. There's two of them that I pick actually. One of them is that you have a self-sufficient, mostly 90% self-sufficient habitat on orbit, someplace off the Earth. And orbit is easy, low Earth orbit or even some other orbit is easy because you can resupply them from Earth if you need to. The other one I really want to see is we start doing some kind of manufacturing in space. And there's 3 different companies going out after asteroids. There's about, I want to say 3 countries that are Japan, US, and one other country are looking at asteroids. There's a lot of possibilities. If you catch a near Earth orbiting asteroid and can bring it back somewhere, maybe around the moon or something.
Yeah.
You don't want to get it close to Earth and make people nervous. But so manufacturing, there's a lot of steps we need to take. Maybe it's not 20 years away. Maybe it's 40 years away. because first you have to do. I'm really excited about possibilities of what you can do in space, and one of them is separation of materials and the ability to keep materials together if you want them together. So foam metal, I think we talked about at one point.
Yeah.
You can take any metal and foam it. It tends to be stronger, it's lighter, and it's easier to haul around and do stuff with. And you get a lot more volume out of it. So if you need to make an I-beam to support some of your structure, then it's a lot easier to do.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other kind of stuff, somebody is proposing it. I don't think there's money for it yet, but you put a long tube up and you spin it around.
Oh yeah. I
All
love
right.
those
So
things.
at the middle of the tube, it's zero gravity or microgravity. At the end of the tube, it's whatever gravity you want it to be. So then you can do if it's a big enough tube, you can do things at each level. You can try have little manufacturers that say, okay, how easy is it to separate oil and water and keep it separated in space? What gravity do you need to be at?
Yeah.
Or can you keep it separated? Because you can keep it together if you want to. You mix it together and there's no gravity, it ain't going to separate. Because what separates is the gravity.
The pressure from gravity separates
The
it.
gravity.
Yeah.
Because one of
Because it
them,
has a different weight.
they have different densities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that has a lot of applications and a lot of things. There are materials in gasoline that are very difficult to separate. What if we find something like that we can scoop out of Jupiter and use in space for fuels
Yeah.
or oxygen or whatever the heck is, there's a lot of possibilities. So we should be starting to learn that kind of stuff. We need to get cheaper rockets. That's a big one. And that's one we talked about quite a bit on the panel. I think we all kind of agreed that a small fission rocket is the most likely one. The next one after that is there may be fusion rockets also.
So do you think with these small modular nuclear reactors, do you think that's going to put pressure on, I would not like political pressure or anything like that, but just intellectual pressure or engineering pressure that they will be able to develop, keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller and get to where they're able to use them in propulsion systems for rockets or
the one they're proposing right now is small enough. I mean,
oh, it is.
Yeah, and it's much more efficient. So we've had small ones before that we set up on things like the Cassini probe, but we haven't had one that lasted long enough with enough power to do things. And right now we're getting there. And if you team a fission reactor with for heat with ion engine, you can go a long ways pretty cheaply. And that's the advantage there. So you get up into low Earth orbit and then you boost for the moon, and maybe it takes you 3 times as long, but you get there cheaper. Let's see, what else did we talk about? Tethers don't appear to be getting much action now. I think they should. In the 80s, I got to know Joe Carroll, who is now called Dr. Tether, because he's out there. So a tether is putting things on the ends of a big string and then spinning the string. And so it's like spinning it around your head, only you got something at each end of it. So if you do that from orbit, you can use a sky hook to come down and pick things up. So maybe you don't use very much energy to boost it into a low Earth orbit, and then the skyhook comes down and grabs it in a net or something, right?
Yeah.
So we're not there, but maybe we'll get there. Somebody may think that's a great idea. The habitats, I think, are going to be real. There's real advantages to having a place for people to live on orbit so that you can do a lot of this stuff. The ISS should be reused if possible.
Yeah.
They are looking at, again, 3 or 4 companies looking at what they call MEVs, mission extension vehicles, that can go up and refuel satellites, readjust them, give them a new program if they need it. And they're looking at possibilities for doing something with space station modules that way. So how cool would that be?
Isn't that remarkable?
And something's going to have to be done with the space station. It's not going to sit there forever because it keeps falling down. That's what happens. And so there's a lot of things like that going on. Yeah, I think we're going to find some interesting things from our planetary exploration. I don't know what we're going to find, but going under the ice at Europa, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
That's just like freaky to think of what you might find. We are finding new materials that have been created under conditions we don't understand very well. Those new materials may have some exciting possibilities.
Right.
NASA has a long history of spin-offs that, Teflon being the famous one, Tang being the other famous one,
Right.
things that NASA developed for space ice cream. Who hasn't eaten space
Oh
ice
yeah, my
cream?
daughter loves that.
I know, it's great stuff.
We used to go get it at Mart because you can get it in the camping section.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, I got it at the Science Center in Jacksonville. I
Yeah,
remember that was
right.
when I
And
got
that's
my first. I remember my first pack, and it was space ice
and
cream.
about the time you were a kid, I would have been bringing them back to other places for people,
Oh, from NASA.
from NASA. Maybe not when you were a kid, but somewhere
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, when if I wanted to, I went on a family reunion or something, I'd take some packets of space ice
Isn't that
cream for
neat?
people. Yeah.
You know what I think's impressive too is you think about like educators or like your experience, like how you were willing, you had a dream to work on space. You went from a farm in Montana to space.
Stunning.
And think of all the people that you've been able to sit down with and educated over the years from your experience moving to Denver, back to Oregon, and in Washington.
I believe a lot of people took inspiration from what I do.
Yeah.
And I have young women I work with today, and there's probably some young men in there too, but young women a lot that I talk to and help them figure out how to navigate their own careers so that they don't take harassment from people, how to deal with that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
how to change the way you talk, how to dress if you want to get ahead, so most of it's what to do. There's probably a few what nots to do in there,
Right.
but I think that having anybody around who is happy and successful in anything they're doing inspires other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, they love that. That's one thing like I'm very blessed in the work environment that I have with AWS is that I work with people from all over the world, all different walks of life, and
Yeah.
you'll see people come in that might be a lot more, I would say, been isolated for a lot of their
Yeah.
life, but they get this opportunity where they have some skill set, whether it's working on, let's say, generators because they
Right.
grew up on a farm, and then they come in where they're working on the generators of the data centers. Well, then
Yeah.
inside that data center, you have an IT engineer that's from
That
across the world.
inspires them. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see them and I'll have these conversations where like, man, I never knew.
Right.
I never knew it was like that over there, or I'd never been around people like this.
Yeah.
And it makes me realize that it's important to get out and it's just like space exploration in a sense, where it's important to go put yourself into an environment that you don't understand or in a situation, and you're gonna.
I love doing that.
Yeah.
I love to learn. And I think if there's anything we should teach our young people, it's that learning is fun.
Yeah.
And we should teach it to them from the time they're born. And they should always be having fun learning things. And because when you learn, everybody grows.
Right.
You grow, your household grows, everybody that knows you grows a little bit because you find things that are exciting that you can't resist. I mean, my friends are like, "Oh yeah, Jane's going to geek out again,"
Yeah.
but they enjoy it. They listen to me and they say, "Oh, that's pretty fun." And but there's almost always things they don't know.
I was just listening to a podcast talking about how humans, we always strive for fun all throughout your
Mhm.
years. And they talked about how the difference between like learning fun when you're a kid might be playing with your new toy or drawing or things like that, or
Mhm.
just playing in the dirt. But then when we become our mature fun is we've developed enough intellectual capability to make our fun process a lot more dynamic. And so the rewards get a lot larger. And they talked about how people that don't, that tend to be less happy, they stay in the quick fun as they
Well,
age, and they don't get the large, like complex
that
issues
could be.
like
That could
crafts
be.
and things.
Yeah, I would say that that we forget how to enjoy some of that quick fun though too.
Yeah.
So some of the quick fun, I think, is a good learning experience. If you are always playing with a different toy, you might be learning a lot from it
Yeah.
because there's mechanics of them, there's color combinations, there's how do the little animals walk and what are they doing? And a lot of people, I know people that watch a lot of videos, and there's a ton of educational entertainment videos out there. So if you think about, we talked about The Expanse, which is about asteroid living.
Yeah.
And if you really look at The Expanse and pay attention to it, you can learn a lot from it. And you can ask yourself a lot of questions. So it might be really fun to watch it.
Yeah.
You might be taking that fun that's at this level, and then your brain, if you give it a chance, will take it up to this level.
Yeah. I like
So
that.
I don't like to think of small fun and quick fun as opposed to big fun, because I think people that I know that read mystery novels have a very investigative mind.
Yeah.
And maybe they're reading them from all over the world. I mean, I've learned about France and England and Africa and a bunch of other places just by reading mystery novels.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of human interaction in those. So I can learn a lot about how humans live. So is it a little fun? Kind of. Is it a big fun? For me, it is.
Yeah. I think,
So
yeah,
I think everybody should think about just everything can be fun.
I like that. That's a good
I
optimistic
like
way to
fun.
look at it. Um, so I wanted to ask you this. You had this huge fascination with space.
Yeah.
Do you have the same with the ocean?
Oh, close to it. Close to it. I really, um, yeah, sort of, because I'm very interested. I've been very interested in the minerals that are in the ocean and what we might do with them. I've been very interested in the idea that where people are putting habitats in the sea. I think that's an interesting idea. I'm an advocate of the idea that we can live on floating platforms in the
Yeah.
ocean, especially as the climate changes. That may be a good way for us to do things. I think we have abused the ocean in ways we can't abuse space, although I'll talk about abusing space in a
Yeah.
minute. There are problems in space. But I think that when you look at the deep sea trenches and the things that are living down below there, and the creatures and the things that live where there is no light, and some of the huge creatures that are down there, and then the other ones just kind of hang on the top of the head and give them a light. There's so
Isn't that
many
isn't that
fascinating things.
incredible?
Yeah,
What
and
is it? Not the angelfish. What is the name of that one?
anglerfish.
Anglerfish. Yeah, the
Yeah,
one with
I
the
know. I love that guy. It's
that
just so
blows
cool.
my mind.
Yeah, and
It's things like that that make you see you talk about like, oh, there maybe there's not anything else out in space, but then you see that fish and you're like, man, if something's that crazy,
there could be some.
endless
So there are
possibilities.
thermal vents on Europa,
Yeah.
and there's 20-mile thick ice, I think it is, and probably liquid water underneath that with thermal vents. And sometimes it cracks enough so the ice shifts and cracks that some water can ooze
Yeah.
out at the top, or liquid can ooze out. So yeah, it's not such a big leap to think something like an anglerfish could be down there,
Yeah. Isn't
which
that
is
crazy?
that's fun.
Well, because there's some of the theories with like how Earth was made or how life started on Earth, right?
Yes, was all the oceans.
Was vents, waters, right? And then
Yeah,
an algae, right? A
yeah,
single cell organism started and
yeah.
it all went from there.
And there's a lot of theories about how that got started,
Yeah.
and we don't really know the answer. We have some pretty good theories that seem to line up. We talked about theories for a while too.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw that out there because a theory is a theory, and any theory can be changed to a new theory when new information comes along. And that's why we call it a theory, not because it's not a summary of the best things that we know, like a mathematical theory that A plus B equals C may always be true, but
Yeah.
it's still just a theory. And there are some that can be proven and some that can't be proven. There's some interesting things going on. I've recently read 3 articles about women who proved mathematical theories by using knitting and crocheting.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated by that
Yeah.
idea. So I think we need, and I think we talked about why people distrust science. I think that may be one of the reasons. We talk about theories all the time. And theory is used very generally in a lot of different ways in our language. And scientists use it in a very specific way. A theory is an amalgamation of the best information I have and all the facts that I know, and how I can put them together into a worldview that makes sense.
Yeah.
that can be mathematically, it can be a theory of evolution, it can be a lot of different things. But the word theory really bothers people, and I wish it didn't.
Yeah.
So let me go back to space debris for a minute.
Oh yeah.
That's
Abusing space.
abusing space. So right now there are 28,000 working satellites in space, or working objects, and there are about 25,000. Maybe I've got those numbers fixed up. About 25,000 unused objects of a decent size, satellite sized or bigger. And then there's 100,000 or 200,000 or half a billion, I don't know how many it is, of very small pieces. And there's a theory called the Kessler syndrome theory. And the theory is that at some point you get so many things in orbit that they inevitably crash into each other. And when they crash into each other, they make smaller things. And right now, people are launching communication satellites like crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, Elon Musk and Starlink. It's just, I don't know how many. I think he wants 10,000 up there. Bezos is starting to put up a whole bunch.
Yeah, I think we
It's
want.
about 4 or 5 European Space Union is putting up some. China is putting up there some. India wants to put up there. So these constellations of satellites, 10,000 each, and everybody having their own is really going to make it crowded up there, first of all.
Yeah.
And then second of all, we have no way right now of cleaning it up. So then we go back to the MEVs, the mission extension vehicles, which you can go in and refuel them. You can push them back down into orbit. One of the things we talked about on the panel is finding a place farther out where we can put them all together and park them together, and maybe even put a big net around them so they don't get away. And then someday we might be able to refine those and manufacture other things out
Oh
of
yeah.
them, right? So if you have a way to melt them all down
We have a knowing material.
and separate them,
Yeah.
we have some pretty expensive materials in those
Yeah.
suckers. So that might be a good option. There's again several companies trying to work on something like this. I guess one of them is looking at
Do we have any liquids that can orbit? Like, is there like a liquid that can attach to things?
and stay attached to it.
Yeah.
Well, most of them will deconstruct the molecules and just go off into space by
Because there's no
themselves.
gravity.
Yeah, there's nothing to hold it. I
That's
mean,
it.
it'll stay together as a little glob for a while, but we have what can I think of it? So if you have ice,
Yeah.
when you put the ice in your freezer, remember how it sits there? It stays ice, but it continues to get smaller and smaller because molecules can come off of ice even though it never melts.
Oh, okay.
And I can't think of the term for it right now. Bad Jane. Anyway, same kind of thing will happen on orbit. If you're
Okay.
in an atmosphere like you're on the space station, that's one of the problems they've had occasionally is globs of stuff floating around.
Oh, okay.
Right. Because and there's some stuff from Skylab was really fun to watch where they pull globs up and they stretch them out and they put them back together and they do a lot of different things with them. It's pretty cool to watch what can happen in zero gravity.
Yeah.
But if you're in actual space, sublimate, that's the term. So I believe that your liquid will just sublimate away.
Oh.
But they're looking at, there's a kind of foam similar to a memory foam kind of thing where things will run into it and just stay in it. So you got to get something that won't tear, or then you end up with more pieces coming
Right.
out the other side. The people looking at nets for bigger pieces. There's a lot of stuff out there, though. The Space Command in Colorado Springs, NORAD, has records of it. Anybody can look it up online if they want to see what it is. There's a lot of stuff out there, and some people are making it worse. The Amazon or the Starlink satellites are not all being brought back down the way they should when they're no longer useful. There are the Chinese are sending up rockets. Their Long March rocket goes up, and the upper stage stays on orbit instead of dropping it back down like everybody else does. The Russians and the Chinese have both done explosive testing to see if they can blow up somebody's satellite.
Oh, geez.
And so that left a lot of crap out there, right? So it's kind of like climate change. We're going to reach a point where we can't do anything with it.
Right.
Where that point is and how close, most people don't think we're very close to it today.
Yeah.
But 10 years from now, if we have another 100,000 satellites up there, then what? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not my area of expertise, so I honestly don't know. But
I wonder what the next thing is. Like, I wonder what the capacity, when they hit capacity, let's say with these satellites, there's going to have to get some regulation, but what is the next thing going to be? That's what I wonder. Like, why do we need so many satellites? It makes me wonder if they'll figure something else out. Like,
because we can't cooperate,
yeah,
Starlink, one constellation of satellites would probably work for everybody.
yeah,
But it costs money. We don't want to share.
yeah,
So if we were sharing, it'd be different. But nobody wants to share. Everybody wants their own satellites.
yeah, that
And
makes sense.
they're competitive both in monetary terms, like Starlink and Amazon, very competitive.
Yeah.
Or
And it's crazy as they work together too. Like,
well, they worked. Yeah, they're
like,
launching some of them together.
yeah, they'll
But then
launch them for
yeah,
us.
but yeah, and that is crazy.
It's like Oppo
So the
research,
next
maybe.
thing,
You're
sorry,
all right.
I think we're going to see. I think we're already seeing a bit of a race for the moon, and not like the Kennedy race in the '60s, but it's a race to get down and claim territory, I believe. And the Chinese have had several of their little rabbits, the Changi, I can't pronounce
Yeah.
it, but they've had their landers. Let me look at this. There's a lot of people putting landers on the moon.
Yeah, I was followed
And
out.
it's
What's that one
amazing.
called? The blue something? The blue light? Does that sound right?
No. Let's see. Got too many notes. There's a lot of people going up.
Do you think
China, Korea, Pakistan, Israel, Japan, Europe, and us are the people going to the moon. That's a lot.
yeah.
So then when do people start? And there is a moon treaty that wasn't signed by most of the major countries that have space capability. It's really not relevant anymore because
Right.
nobody wants to abide by it. And how and what's going to happen when people start claiming space on the moon?
Yeah.
What happens if commercial ventures sit down and claim a bunch of space? What happens if China claims half the moon? Maybe they claim the whole dark side of the moon because their little lander's been all over there. I don't know. But something's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's going to be some kind of pressure point in there.
Yeah, and I hope they don't try and work it out here on Earth with, power.
I don't really want them to. Yeah, I don't know how we can work that out. We can't. We're not very good at working stuff out in general.
Right.
So,
isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Would there be any benefit to taking our nuclear waste and getting it into space and launching it out? Did I ask you that last time?
I don't think you did, but I don't think there is. For one thing, it would be very expensive.
Yeah.
Very expensive. When you're looking at, I think the current costs are $4,000 a kilogram, 4,000 a pound.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot of money. Maybe it's 10,000 still. My brain is
No, you're
confused
right.
right now with what the current prices are versus
Right.
the projected prices in 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's expensive. There's a lot of places you don't want to put it. There's people that said send it to the sun. That's really expensive
Yeah.
because then you have to not only get off the Earth, you have to break Earth orbit, and you have to send it on a long trajectory in there. So when we're talking about thousands of tons, I don't think it makes much sense.
Right. Yeah, I've wondered about that. Just that seems to be one of those issues we have here on Earth that there's really no answer. I think they're putting it in grout and they're trying to they're figuring out ways, but obviously it's all very expensive.
One of the
But it's still
countries
here.
is it's either Finland or I think it's one of the Norse countries is starting to bury it. They have a repository for it.
Oh, okay.
Which is what we never could agree on doing here.
Yeah.
We almost put it in the one, and then Obama canceled it. So we don't have a good place for it here.
Right. Before we go, I wanted to ask you about, have you ever played into any of the, any conspiracy theories that you've dug into? Because I know you're big into sci-fi, and I know that can create a lot of imagination. Has there any that you've kind of been fascinated with?
The UFOs,
The
the
UFOs.
whole Roswell and the other ones. It's when you go to Roswell itself, there are testimonials from people on their deathbeds and other people who knew them that got them from somebody else's deathbed. They're kind of like, huh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow. So I definitely am not convinced on that one. I also knew some people a long time ago that um, one of them was the Air Force, worked for Project Blue Sky, chasing UFOs,
Yeah.
and he was like, "Yeah, I can't tell you. Yeah, yeah,
See, so the other day I'm in Timberline Lodge and we were up there on that snowboarding trip and I sit down and visit with a guy and he's a airline pilot
mm-hmm,
and he flies from San Francisco to Hawaii. That's his
mm-hmm,
route. And I was like, hey man, I got to ask you, have you seen anything? And he goes, let me show you a video.
yeah,
Pulls out his phone, filmed on his phone, and it's these orbs, like lights. And there's like 2 of them. And then all of a sudden, there's like 5 of them. And some you can see moving, and the other one, like they go out.
yeah,
And then, but what's crazy about these things is there's no central point of light in the film. And to me, I'm like, what could it be?
I,
Like, what could it be? A gas that we don't know, where it's like
I don't know.
a ball
Yeah.
of gas coming off the ocean,
So
and it's always above the ocean.
the problem with all that kind of stuff is once you start looking at what they're doing, it doesn't make a dang bit of sense.
Yeah,
I mean, crop circles, I don't think so.
right.
Cow mutilations, nah.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to be doing that. Pulling us up and doing examination, I don't think so.
Right,
They got that technology, we wouldn't remember what had happened.
right.
So, and flying around like that, there's no purpose to it. You know,
Yeah.
you can't, it's pretty hard to imagine what anybody, you know. And so a lot of science fiction writers call that touristing. You know, there's tourists that are doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I did go to,
Isn't that such a good point? If they were here, they would have to have intention.
well, and why wouldn't they just talk to us? You
Yeah.
know? I mean, what would keep them from doing that? And there's so then all you go out in science fiction, there's all these, oh yeah, there's the Galactic Federation and they won't let you talk to anybody who's not got a certain level of technology. And oh yeah, they're keeping us in a big bubble so we can't get off Earth. No, that we've sent Voyager all the way out.
Yeah, Voyager's
to
40
Oort
years.
clouds. They're out way out there.
Yeah.
They have run into no barriers anyway. I doubt anybody's keeping us inside a barrier.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of I want to believe in it. The other one is the whole ESP thing, and whether you call it a conspiracy theory, my gut feeling is we have something like that. We don't know what it is. We don't know what to do with it.
With the ESP, what is the?
Well, so mind-to-mind communication of some kind, right?
Have you
And-
seen the telepathy tapes or heard about them?
I've
yet?
seen some of them, and every time I see them, I think maybe. But I've also, and then you go, okay, so there's people that live together that have the same thought at the same time. But there's also, boy, I had a next door neighbor, same time every day, no matter what time it was. We would call each other and our phones would be busy because we were calling each other.
Yeah.
So there's things like that I think it's possible there are things we don't know.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast, of course, again. I can't remember the guy's name. But he was talking about how a lot of it is how humans, we have like a subconscious facial recognition.
Mm-hmm.
He said, and a lot of times people can just recognize over time, if they spend enough time with somebody, will analyze a movement and you've been around them enough to know that that's what they're thinking or
Right.
that's what they're about to say
Right.
or something along those lines. And which is pretty remarkable.
It is, and then some of this stuff they talk about too. Like I when I was in school, my mother, it seems like 3 out of 5 days a week would cook whatever it was we had for school lunches.
Yeah.
We didn't get it. We didn't know ahead of time what it was going to be. We just got it,
Yeah.
and we'd find out what dinner was going to be, and it was the same thing we just had for lunch.
Yeah.
It wasn't 3 out of 5, but it was often.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, there's certain dishes that you kind of rotate through on a farm community, and
Yeah.
there aren't a huge number of them. So the other thing about those are the odds for some of those things occurring
Yeah.
are much lower. I mean, it's like if you get 20 people in a room, the odds that 2 of them will have the same birth date
Yeah.
the month and day, are pretty high.
Yeah.
And yet, when you think about it, you think it wouldn't be very high, right?
Yeah.
20 people out of, 365 days of the year.
Yeah.
But apparently, there's things I don't understand about how those odds are calculated.
Right. It's one of those
And
things like,
that's not something I'm terribly interested in either. It happens or it doesn't.
right. It's not a life changing.
Yeah.
They, yeah, because I wish I could think of her name. Allie's really good at this, remembering everybody's names. But the lady that wrote the book, The Telepathy Tapes, there's, I guess, a lot of research out with people that have autism
Mm.
being able to communicate.
Mhm.
And they've been doing studies now where they're putting them in positions where they'd have no way of knowing.
You'd think.
And it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see what comes out about that.
The twin studies were like that too, where they put twins in completely different places.
I've experienced that. My ex-girlfriend had a set of twin boys.
Yeah.
One of the boys, they were 4 at this time, was upstairs and he started screaming. And the twin downstairs, he goes, Brixton smashed his finger. And I was like, what? Sure enough, Brixton had
That's what
smashed.
he done, huh?
He had smashed his finger
Yeah.
in the toy lid.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was losing it for a second. I'm like, he had to, maybe he knew by the pitch of his scream that he has a different pitch. Oh, but it was crazy.
So those are the kinds of things I want to believe in. I
Yeah.
would like to believe that we had some of that capability
Yeah.
and that we would get better at communication because we have some of that communication capability. But I want to believe in it so much that I have a hard time believing in it, right?
I like that.
Because when I read the things, I was like, yeah, you want to believe this. Go read the stuff that says it's not true. Well, there's a lot of that out there too.
That's what's happening with me and aliens is because I've been trying so hard.
Really?
And then every time, like the most respected individuals talk about it, I'm like, I could talk out of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah. It's
that's
like
because
that
I'm
one.
trying so hard.
Yeah. Convince me. Yeah. It's like those little tables. Convince me. Well, yeah, because it's hard to, it's really hard to imagine there are aliens who haven't bothered to contact us
Yeah.
or haven't bothered to send any signals out into the galaxy or universe.
Yeah.
So,
And
then
who
what?
knows what it even is. You and I talked earlier about how maybe like maybe our math is wrong, or
Yeah.
like that's something to think about. If our math is wrong and our civilization is built off of this math, then that leaves so much room for a misunderstanding of another civilization.
Yeah. There's things like that. And there's also much simpler things, which is there can be other kind of life forms that we don't have a good imagination
Yeah,
for.
I
And
was
so then if you've got a life form that is intelligent in the sea, their way of thinking is quite different than ours. And that's why I still think dolphins and whales, we need to spend some time more time trying to talk to them,
Yeah.
because I do think they know stuff we don't know.
So I met a guy once. He believed in it's funny you bring up dolphins. He believes that dolphins are like mermaids. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, because he was from the Dominican Republic. And when he was young, he wrecked a jet ski
And they rescued him.
and the dolphin pushed him into
Yeah.
shore.
Yeah.
And he swears that it was communicating with him. And I mean, and this guy's he's an engineer. He's
There's a lot of people that have stories like that. There
Yeah.
are a lot of stories out there. And then they did a study on dolphin communication, and some people concluded that yes, they did communicate with them. Others concluded that they were unable to. Others concluded they did the wrong things. So it wasn't ever a definitive study, but I do think it's worth studying. I think if we want to know more about alien life, we should be studying that.
Yeah, studying the dolphins
Because
and
the
things.
ocean is very different than what we live in.
When you have these fun conversations like at a bar
Yeah.
or something like that, I've always said I think the aliens are in the ocean because of these. There's what goes on down there is so
Well, the octopus.
out of our remarkable. The fact
Crazy
that that
enough.
thing can adapt and change its
See,
colors.
now you know me, because my brother he'd call me from a bar somewhere and say, Jane, tell these people why you have to rotate spacecraft in space.
Yeah.
Okay, I will.
Why do you have to rotate space?
Because the sun hits one side and that you get a temperature difference between the two sides.
Oh, that makes sense. So if one side was expanding
Yeah,
and the other
they call
side.
it the barbecue turn that the space shuttle or whatever it used to go on.
Oh, rotisserie.
Yeah,
You got a
yeah,
rotisserie.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Not
interesting.
not everything needs that, but some do.
That's interesting. Yeah, because it gets like what is it, 250 degrees Celsius to like negative 250 as it orbits or something?
Yeah, and the differences between those are, I mean, there's a lot of other factors in it. Again, that is a very complex thermodynamics
Yeah.
question that I don't have the answer to, but I know they do it, and there are people who do know the answer to that. So,
Do you, do you know any uh, inventions that NASA has created through their research that we use in everyday life? Like, is there something that you've used?
Teflon,
Yeah, Teflon,
Teflon all the time. Tang, that was the big one
Tang,
for
right?
my
The
youth
Tang drink.
because Tang was developed for the astronauts. Um, there are hundreds of them.
I think sunglasses. I think NASA invented.
Certain polarized sunglasses, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Velcro, and I can't. There is a whole spin-off series. If you look up NASA spin-offs, you'll see a lot of them. There are so many of them, I wouldn't even try to name all of them.
Yeah.
They give them to people. If you develop something with it, they give you the patent for it,
Oh,
and
that's
then you
neat.
can take it out and do something else with it. There are also a whole lot of things that went up with the space shuttle called getaway specials, and they were little garbage can size experiments that
Yeah.
people did, and they did a lot of different things with them.
Isn't that
And I
neat?
don't even know what all the things. I mean, there were so many things that came out of that. So speaking of what's on space too, first time in space ever, they have made miso paste. It was the first time they have manufactured a food in space.
Oh, wow.
I thought that was pretty big
Yeah.
because we know how to grow things in space, and they've eaten some tomatoes and a few things like that, but we haven't, because the conditions are so different in gravity. We haven't done that yet. So
For actually having like a process of some sort
yeah, the
of,
Japanese sent some stuff up, and they sent some ingredients up, and they made miso paste out of it.
oh, isn't that neat?
Yeah, it's
And
pretty cool.
they just took the first X-ray in space, right?
I don't remember. I don't know.
Yeah, I think just recently they took the first X-ray,
Wow.
which is kind of, I mean, that's
That should be
interesting.
the same as on Earth, but it's good. It's good technology to have
Yeah.
because you do once you start building things on in space, you do know how to. You have to know how to be able to look at your welds, to look at your joints, to see if things are tight, to have ways of
Yeah.
testing everything.
I think it's interesting. Like, I always have this fascination. I think we talked about this before, but like, I look at like NASA, and it's going to sound crazy, but like Disney in a very similar manner
Yeah,
where like they started with something, an idea, and then the amount of patents just from their
it does.
curiosity. I
It
mean,
does.
like people don't really like Disney has touched so much of our lives just through their patents in videography, filming,
Right.
and then NASA has
And the
developed,
robotics even.
and their robotics are incredible. And yeah, and then you have NASA, which you think about this little mouse, and here they have these patents on robotics, and it kind of gives you this ambition to try new things because you don't know what
Mhm.
the byproduct is.
It does, and people, everything we've ever done, there have been byproducts that have been
Yeah,
extremely useful. Nobody ever predicted what the invention of the printing press was going to do,
yeah,
and it changed our worlds completely in both good ways and bad ways. There were conspiracy theorists in the medieval ages,
yeah.
and they were being printed up stuff and spreading it around, all these lies and stuff about plagues and all kinds of things. So we haven't changed as humans since then.
Yeah.
We just have
We
different
just have different
technology to do
tools.
it with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been on Spaceship Earth in Epcot?
I
The one that goes up in the ball, and it talks about it's human communication. And it goes from
I think I did.
it
I'm
goes from
trying to
like the
remember.
burning of the Library of Alexandria, and then eventually
It's a long time since I was there.
we were
So.
just there. We go.
Oh, okay.
I love that attraction because it talks about exactly what you just talked about. The
Yeah.
printing press. It says how the printing press went. I mean, what are the it increased the rate of our communication and technology at such a high level.
Hundredfold or more. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it goes through that, and then all of a sudden we're developing, the telecommunications, and then we're communicating with space. It's like in the scale of human
Yeah.
life, that is just a blink,
Yeah.
and it started with that printing press.
It is. It is. And the side effects, again, not just having printed things spread around, but people learn to read.
Yeah,
More and more people learn to read because people could get something to learn to read from.
Yeah.
And then people started, were writing books, and fiction came out of all that. And
Yeah.
this first science fiction was written in 1300s by a woman. It was about a world up in the clouds,
Yeah.
a very science fiction, fantastical world of other creatures, aliens. It was fascinating
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's people like that were authors. Then you have people like Da Vinci as a painter, and here he was drawing up aircraft that
He is still we are still finding amazing things out about what he did.
it makes you wonder, like the theory of us living in a simulation is like, how did he know some of that stuff?
Well,
The
I
mind
mean,
is so incredible.
because, and some of it was, and
Maybe
some,
it's back to the arts.
it
How
comes
you were
back to the arts and the communication, but some of the stuff he was doing were things that mechanically they knew how to do then, that he would just put them all together in a way that nobody else had done.
Yeah.
And if you look at, you go back and look at the history of China and the Arabias, all of those cultures, they were way ahead of us on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And then they lost it all. So are we going to lose it all? Maybe.
They talk about that in Spaceship Earth. They talk about
Yeah.
how the Arabic countries were like one of the most knowledgeable because of their
were.
literature.
Absolutely.
So do you think that people that speak other languages or have obviously write in different languages, do you think they have a different understanding of the world than other languages?
I think they do. I think that a language is a part of your culture that builds how you think.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually working on learning Spanish. I used to speak some German, and then I have English. Well, the way German is structured is very different from either Spanish or English. And I'm still struggling with some of the Spanish structure. I've only been learning for about a year now, so
Yeah.
I'm a long ways from an expert on it. But yeah, so the way you say things and the way you put what kinds of verbs you use, how much passive and active you use, where you put the nouns, where you put what you use for pronouns, all of those things
Yeah.
must affect. I can't see how they can keep from affecting how you think.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I'm learning a language. First of all, it keeps my mind sharp and I'm learning something new.
Yeah.
And then second of all, I think that it does give you a different look at the world by giving you a different way. And the examples they use for Spanish are quite different than the examples we would think of. So, and German, it was just for me, German, like I'm an engineer, German was like, yep, we're going to march in a line right down the way and everything's going to be here and here and here. And that is kind of how we see the German psyche
Yeah.
is people who line things up, make sense of them, and then keep doing them that way.
Yeah. And then overcomplicate our cars.
But then
Yeah.
on the other hand, one of the most creative people I know is a native German. She lived in Germany until she was about 30 years old. One of the most absolutely creative. I don't think there's an artistic talent she doesn't have.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, she's really fun to be around.
That's one of my favorite things about where I work is because I work with people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just in conversation, if you're like you and I were talking about earlier, if your thought process is more outward and absorbing than looking inward on how it's affecting you,
Yeah.
you can see how their thought process is so different. And lately I've been like, man, I always wonder it's because they were raised about writing a different language. The mechanisms in place for the way they write and communicate could have created a different brain pathways than
Oh,
we
yeah.
have. And
If you look at things like Japanese and
Yeah.
the way their language is structured, very, very different from ours.
yeah,
I mean, and it's much more detailed and nuanced. And then you talk about all the things about how many words for snow somebody has. And those things do affect you.
yeah,
So we talked about sports earlier a little bit. And when I worked at a large company who shall remain unnamed in Portland, it was a multinational crew. And we had people from all over the world working there. And the World Cup soccer was playing football, World Cup
Yeah.
football. And again, countries from all over the world playing. And in our building, on our floor was the only place you could get a really big screen TV that we could live stream all the games on. So any time of day, and I think probably night, I didn't stay too late.
yeah,
there was always different people watching. And there was not a single country there that we didn't have somebody cheering
Oh, is it?
from that country.
Yeah.
And that everybody else kind of aligned behind one or the other, But we
Yeah.
got to talk to all these people from different countries. And we talk about how football affected their lives and
Yeah.
and I learned to call it football so what we do it now. I'm going to tell you a little joke here. So in this country, we play what I call hand egg because we use our hands and it looks like an egg.
Yeah.
And they play football, which they use their feet, and it's
Yeah.
a ball, right? So
Isn't that funny how
I
we
can
just
really offend people that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you saw the book behind you, but that's from
Oh yeah,
Flo, who we interviewed.
yeah.
She was on the original the first pro women's football team
Oh,
in Manchester, England, the Lady Corinthians, and
whoa,
that's a book about it. Yeah.
whoa, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing. You talk about you kind of pioneered your way into engineering through Montana
Oh yeah,
State.
she's doing it. Yeah,
She did it with soccer, and they played in cow fields
I bet
and
I'm
things to
sure
get
they did.
just
I'm gonna
because
have
they
to
wanted to
look.
play.
I'm gonna take a picture before I leave and,
Yeah, you can get. I know
look
you
that
can.
book up. Yeah,
It's and she's an incredible lady, and this is back, in the 50s. She was born in the 30s there, but it's interesting to think how cultures shape around, like we talked about earlier, sports and the teams, and people tend to choose a team all the way through their life, even when they stop,
yeah, yeah.
or they try and find a community, I should say,
That
all the
has
way
that
through.
does that team. Yeah, right. Because so we went to again a different World Cup, but I was watching all the Cup games in airports as I traveled around the
Yeah,
country, and I ended up in Livingston, Montana, and my sister had no idea. She didn't have a TV even that played things like that. And so we called around to the sports bars until we found one that was
yeah,
showing the games because it was the final coming up.
yeah,
And I wanted to watch that final. It was in France. And we got in there and boy, I mean, there was France and I can't remember who their opponent was, but there were two definite teams inside that bar with nobody from either country.
yeah. Isn't that neat?
Yeah, but it was pretty cool. Yeah.
I love that. I love those type of situations because it really shows you how all connected we are in
We
our
are.
fascinations
Yeah.
and it's because it's like the Olympics. It's like
Yeah.
every time the
I
Olympics
love the
comes
Olympics.
around, yeah, the world kind of shuts down things, and it's like goes back to just our basic fundamentals
Yeah.
of competition, striving to be
But we also
good at
have
something.
what I think of as the underdogs, where there are countries who don't have a chance of winning a medal.
Yeah,
But they're still, it was like Cool Running,
yeah,
when
Cool Runnings,
the
yeah,
Jamaica team went out there. But if you read their story was that everybody was out there helping them.
yeah,
That other teams gave them parts for their
right,
sled and things. And so they were never without what they needed because other teams were helping them. To me, that's the Olympic spirit. And then you have the underdog, the guy that was in some kind of long swimming thing, and everybody else, he was like finished an hour and a half after everybody else. He's in the pool all by himself,
yeah,
but he's going to finish that damn thing. And he did.
yeah,
And that is a triumph to have been at that's what I think we forget is something like the Olympics. It is a triumph to be there.
yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. It's a triumph to be there and do your best. So we're back to personal best again.
Right.
We started kind of there, didn't we?
Yeah, I like that. My daughter, she's started playing volleyball. It's her first sport that she's
Mm-hmm.
played, like a competitive sport.
Right.
And she's like, Dad, do you think I could play in the Olympics someday? And I was like, if you dedicate enough time and you try and you always are the best, you can try.
Yeah.
I was like, they're the best in the world. And a lot of people try and fail. I was like, but if you want to, if you want to try it,
The other thing is go for a scholarship, Just
yeah.
keep doing the best you can and maybe you get a scholarship to a good college,
That's what I said. Or she asked, we talked exactly about that. I said,
Yeah.
you work your way up, and if you always try to be your best and you can get to where you're one of the best on the team, you'll eventually work your way up a ladder, get into college. And I told her about scholarships. It was like, you can play at a scholarship level at college. And then when you play, we talked about how you really only can be as good as your competition when it comes to sports like that, where
Yeah.
you're playing
Yeah.
against another individual.
Yeah.
And I said, so if you play in an environment where you play against a lot harder of teams, you're more likely to be better as you're
Yeah.
putting yourself up against the stress of, of competitiveness. And then she asked, do they make a lot of money? And I said, no, they don't.
No.
And she was like, oh, I don't want to do that. And I was like,
Well, then
well,
she should go for soccer.
yeah,
Tell her to go for soccer, although she's kind of starting late.
yeah. She's not big into soccer.
Yeah.
She loves volleyball.
Soccer is one of the best. Well, soccer and basketball are the two that women can make money at
Right.
now.
And golf.
Oh yeah, golf.
Yeah, they're
Golf, yeah.
doing really well in golf. It's
I
remarkable.
keep forgetting that's a sport.
Yeah, it's like a giant game of fetch with yourself.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you this. We're probably getting up on almost 2 hours. Do you have any regrets going back with your time at NASA? Was there like a different? I shouldn't say
Mm,
regrets. Is there anything you would have loved to have worked on at NASA or that you didn't
mm.
get the chance to?
Whoa. Okay, so let's start out by saying I wanted to be an astronaut at one time, and when I started working down there, I was in my very early 30s, mid 30s. Still had a chance at it. I was going to go get a master's in aeronautical engineering in the evenings. Still trying to work out all my life so I could do that. Challenger went down right after I got down there. And it was pretty clear to me that Challenger going down was going to put the program back at least 3 years, by which time they would have this huge backlog of people who wanted to fly but never got to fly.
Yeah.
So I just kind of gave up the idea. Would I have done it without that? I don't know. Maybe I still would have futzed around and not got that done, but it was great. What else would I have done? Part of me wishes I'd stayed more in hands-on stuff instead of getting into management.
Yeah.
I like the hands-on, really, but every time I got someplace, they're like, "Oh, you're a good project manager. We're going to put you in that. We're going to make you the product manager. We're going to make you the engineering manager."
Yeah.
And I do feel I helped a lot of people that way.
I
I
bet you
think I
did.
made life a better place for a lot of people. I know there's a couple of them thought I made their life worse, but you can't please everybody.
That's right.
So I guess I don't have a lot of regrets
I
or
like
things
that.
that I've done something different. I think I worked with some really outstanding people that really threw themselves in. I mean, this was in an era when what you heard about government employees is they were lazy, they didn't do anything. These people worked their asses off.
That's what I heard.
They were there a lot of hours. They put everything they had into it. They wanted to make everything the best it could be. Um, I think, and I mean, I knew a lot of the old guys, and everybody there was from the weld shop and the sewage people to
Yeah.
everybody was emotionally tied to the programs and emotionally tied to the success of the space program.
That's the common theme I get with people that worked at NASA. They
Yeah.
were and what's sad for some of them that I visited with is they have a lot of sadness of aging out of it. And that it was hard
Oh
for me to
yeah,
hear.
yeah. Well, and the program aged out on me, and the part I was working in, everything was going into the space station. What happened at the space center was going down and down, lower numbers of people everywhere all the
Yeah.
time, and so yeah, there was no way for me to get to work on the space station.
Yeah.
Other regrets. So one time, oh man, I kind of wish I'd done it. I wasn't going to pay enough to live on, but I was approached about a job for a company that was working for. This was back in the 80s, that was working on putting down on Mars and using Martian resources to make enough fuel to come back up.
Yeah.
And I had the experience and the will, and they wanted me to come work for them, but it didn't pay very much at
Right.
all. It was a grant. They were working on a shoestring, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I probably couldn't afford to drive to their site every day to do the job.
Right.
We had another. Oh, we had another one back in the 80s. A couple of people and I were looking at. They were taking the Titan III missiles out of the silos,
Oh,
and we wanted to pull the motors on them, and we had a project we wanted to do with them. And that again, we just weren't organized and didn't know enough about funding or anything else to make
right.
that one a go.
One thing I
Yeah.
kind of I'll say envy or have like a lot of respect for is that, I don't have a degree, and you went through a lot to get your degree, and you had such a drive to go through
Mhm.
the hard times and finish your degree. And then all the opportunities it gave you that you probably never really suspected.
Oh
I
yeah.
always
Oh yeah.
I'm sure I'll use that story, if I ever have the chance to mentor any, including my own kids, that just get that degree, show that discipline, and make sure
Just
that you,
so first know what you want to do.
yeah, I
There's
think we
going to be
talked about that.
there's
Yeah.
going to be a place for a lot of different people. I think degrees are good. If I hadn't been female, I wouldn't have needed the degree to do a lot of what I did. I worked with a lot of men who didn't have
Right.
degrees that were my age, and they were doing the same kinds of things I was doing.
Yeah.
And they were able to work up through the ranks. They worked up from the refinery, they worked up from the manufacturing, they worked up through welding or something, all these different places because men could do that then.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had to have the degree to do it. But I also yeah, I do have that drive to
Yeah.
just go do and some of my friends and my family kind of thought I was nuts because I'm from Montana. I moved to California and get a job. Then I leave California and go to Colorado. And there was, good reasons. And then I picked up from there. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you, I think I told you how I got the job opportunity at Space Center, didn't
Yeah.
I? Anyway, so I go down there to the Space Center. My whole family's on the other side of the country. They're all, Shane, what are you doing down there? Why don't you come visit me? No, we're
Yeah.
not going to come visit. That's a long ways away.
Right.
And then when the Space Center started to lose a lot of its funding, and it was before any commercial funding came in, and the NASA funding was all pulled, I picked up and moved myself and two teenagers to Oregon, which
Yeah.
anybody would think that was a crazy thing to do.
Yeah.
Turned out to be a great thing to do. I was really happy with it.
Yeah.
Didn't turn out perfect. Turned out with a lot of problems of its own, but
Right.
So, yeah,
Can I ask you a deep question?
yeah.
When you moved, because I know you talk really highly of like your family, your mom
hmm
did a lot for you and all those things. How were you able to make the decision for yourself to follow your dream and not let your love for your family or your time with them kind of hold you back?
Spreadsheets. I did
Yeah.
spreadsheets. And I did come visit my family almost every year.
So you had a
And I
plan in
came
place.
back to visit. My kids were both born in Colorado. And I went back to visit my friends in Colorado every year. And that was kind of like my family of choice. And the same is true here. I've lived here and then I went and worked other places, but I spent a lot of time back here with some people that I know. And my family, I traveled a lot. And when I traveled, I would stop when I went by where my
Yeah.
family was and visit.
So you did a
So,
good job of supplementing that love for your
yeah, and I
family.
was an early adopter of a cell phone. And, I don't know, in the old days, you remember how
Yeah.
the cell phone, you had a certain number of minutes you could
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
You get to the end of the month, and I've got like an hour. I can call everybody I know now.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of that. And that was very great for communication. I could keep up with people all over the place. But I'm a big user of spreadsheets. These are the pluses, these are the minuses. How much is it going to cost? Can I regain any of that money back, or do I need to? It's because
Yeah.
it costs a lot of money moving around,
Yeah.
and it hasn't always been a good thing for me. I lost a lot of money moving west, a lot of money.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of kids get, including myself, they hold themselves back for maybe their grandparents or their parents,
mm,
and they don't ever get to go live maybe the life that would supplement them personally very well. And they use that. I'm guilty of it. I mean, I've been around all over the country and I've done it, but I'm in kind of that position right now where, I have opportunities to go back to Florida, and
mm,
there's this one thing that lingers over me, and it's like, man, my grandparents I'm very close with them. And I'm like, but that I just would be, I think, so sad. But then, on a part of it, I'm going to be sad when the time comes if I'm across the country. But also, I know that my grandparents support me and love me, and
and how would they feel if they felt like they held you
they
back?
held, yeah,
And I think my family is that they think I'm kind of nuts sometimes, but oh, Jane, go follow your dream.
yeah,
And I'm the oldest in the family, so that's kind of weird because everybody's younger, and I feel like I'm the advisor.
yeah,
But there's also I get to a point in a job where I'm ready for a new adventure.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm bored, especially, it's that it just feels like the right time.
I like that.
And sometimes you have to do those things. I think today we are so fortunate. You could FaceTime every day with your grandparents if
Yeah.
you wanted. And you just get them set up before you go and make sure everybody can do that. Maybe you have to pay their internet bill or something.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then you've got your adventure. And I did some of that. I mean, I got married when I was in Florida. Instead of having a big wedding, I flew my family in.
Yeah.
That was what I wanted.
So I like that you were able to supplement what you needed out of them by
Yes,
seeing them
yes.
and putting it
Talking.
into your life's program.
Before cell phones, my long distance bill was substantial.
Oh, I bet.
And it was just a cost of living that far away to me.
And it was worth it.
And it was worth it.
Yeah.
You can't stay in touch with people if you don't talk to them.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I needed to have that conversation
So
with
you're
somebody
very
that's done it.
fortunate today to have so
Yes.
many ways to do that. You can talk, and definitely on the cell phone, you can get on a plane and come back to visit quite easily.
Very easily.
And yeah, it's
Yeah,
good.
that is one. I'm gonna complain for a second.
Okay.
One of my pet peeves about people is they'll be like, they're like, oh, I always wanted to go to Florida, and I'm
Uh-huh.
like, why don't you go? Well, it's a long plane trip. I'm like, are you kidding me? You probably spent more time
Yeah.
this week
Yeah, I know.
watching a TV series,
That it would cost you to go to Florida. Yeah.
yeah, or the time
The
to fly.
time. I know. I get the same thing from people because
I
I
just
go
wish-
to, I tend to go to Europe. Yeah. I've been to London. I've been to Europe.
Yeah.
And, I've got these trips going out there, and people are like, oh man, I wish I could do that. The only place I've ever been is Hawaii. How many times have you been to Hawaii? Oh, like 4 or 5.
Yeah,
You could have gone to Europe for less than it cost you to go to Hawaii.
yeah,
Yeah. You could have been in London or Paris. No. Yeah.
yeah. You think
Yeah.
maybe it's a misunderstanding people have of just the way they hold themselves back about it. I don't
Well,
know.
and we've got this whole thing about Hawaii.
Of course, it's the only state I haven't been to.
Well, I have
I keep
about,
going back
I
to
have about
Florida.
5 or 6 states I haven't been to. So
I found out that it was attainable, I think, because it was a dream of mine when I was young to do all
Yeah.
50, and I did 49, and I was like, oh, I'm $400 away from Hawaii.
and I know I'm like 5 or 6, but then I wanted to
Yeah.
go overseas instead.
I like
I went
that.
to Panama. I've done some fun things. So
That's what we're working on. We want to get overseas now that Hadley's older. I want her to go do.
so easy,
Yeah,
so easy.
we're gonna do it. Before we wrap up, I gotta tell you, I just have really, I gotta say, I appreciate all the steps that you took in life for your experiences for me to be able to sit here and enjoy them. I think it's remarkable.
Thank you.
That you just have done so much. It's very inspiring for people to understand, like, go get that next job. Go live your dream. Go be fascinated. Go learn.
Yeah.
And you did it without, I'm sure there was some fear and, to move your kids around.
Yeah. But what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
The worst it's like getting your hair cut. People are always like, "Oh, I've never had short hair." What's the worst that can happen? It grows back.
Yeah.
Because I got my head shaved. What's the worst that can happen? It grows back.
Yeah.
So the same is true of a lot of those moves. I went to Florida. What's the worst that could happen? I moved back. I didn't like it. My family needs me, whatever it was. The worst that can happen is almost always something you can overcome.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was trying to get somebody to move to Europe with me, and they kept seeing it as a lifelong thing. And I'm like, no, if we don't like it in a year, we come back.
Right.
Okay.
It's kind of one of those things like where once you start to make really tough decisions, the next tough decision's probably a little bit easier.
It does. I broke a lot of rules going into engineering, and maybe that helped me
Yeah.
because I had to break rules to do that.
Yeah.
And it was something I really wanted to do. And so maybe that gave me the courage to go, okay, I'm going to move to Los Angeles. I'm going to move to Florida. I don't know.
Yeah.
And travel. I love travel.
I like that. And think about how it shaped you now. Like, you're in your young 70s and how you get to use those experiences. You go to the conventions and
Yeah.
still get to speak, and you have all
So
these.
much fun.
Yeah.
I have so much fun is what I have.
So you've kind of built your, I would say, like your, what would you say? Not your, resume of life, like to where now you get to have so many opportunities in your retirement years to enjoy and dive in
But
and
again, I'm taking them too. I talk to other people. It's like, I don't think I'd want to go to those. So many people at those conventions. I know, isn't that fun?
yeah,
And other people are like, yeah, but what if you get kidnapped when you're in Panama? Whatever.
yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong in life. When none of us know if we're going to be here tomorrow.
right.
There's no guarantees in life, and so you might as well. And I think I found that somewhere in high school where I didn't have a great high school experience or middle school, and somewhere in my senior year, I just went, "What? I've done everything they wanted me to, and they're still not happy with me. I might as well go do what I want to do."
Yeah.
And I think we need to remember that.
I like that. So you learned that lesson young that
I did.
you need to you're never going to please everybody and you need to please yourself.
And you need to think about what does please you. So many people are unhappy when they get what they think they want. But then you need to sit back and think, okay, so yeah, you asked me about NASA. So I did so many things. I don't know if I'd give up any of those experiences for something different, right? Because it
Yeah.
was good experiences. The other places I've worked, I've had some really good experiences in places I've lived. People, I've never been someplace where I was so unhappy I wanted to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just from knowing you for a couple months, I wonder if that has to do with just your outlook on life. How you talked about even the way you interact with people you don't know, how you try and give this optimistic look at who they are. And it's
I
maybe,
think that's part of it, and I think it's because I want to see the world that way.
yeah.
I want my imagination to work with people, and there are people that I just conclude are just a mess, and you see a lot of people you can't do anything about. There's nothing.
Isn't that hard?
It is
I know
very hard.
exactly what you
I
mean.
have had family members like that, and to know that I can't help them is very hard.
Yeah.
But you do have to. I think if we live a good life and are true to our beliefs, and our beliefs are moral and ethical, that life will be fun.
Yeah.
I think that it's impossible to live a good life and not have fun.
I agree with you. We had a lady on here, Marjorie, and she said, I think it's from a movie. She said, "Life's a banquet and only the poor suckers are starving." I've always loved that ever since she told me that. Do you think some of that fascination, well, you talk about you growing up on a farm. I wonder if you went through this. I went through this. Is you just want to get out there and see so much more because at the time when technology was advancing, a farm seemed so basic to me. And
Mhm.
there was so much more out there. I had this fascination with the rest of the world and all the cool stuff that's going on. But being on the farm, I was also able to have an imagination, but accept reality. That you
You
talked about people
do.
getting injured on
You
the
do,
farm.
but you're being asked to do a lot of things that are just beyond your abilities on a farm.
Yeah.
I believe anyway that it's like when I told the story about working on a piece of machinery that was beyond my abilities, but I had to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing, there are a lot of people who don't see beyond that. I don't know what the difference is because I used to laugh and tell people my destiny from where I was growing up was to be married to a drunken farmer who beat me
Right.
a farmer who beat me when he was drunk and he was drunk all the time, right?
Yeah.
So I beat that destiny just by leaving, right? So, and that probably, this was a joke. It
Yeah.
wasn't going to ever happen that way. But when the life around you seems limited, if you can find a way to look beyond that, I think you can really open up your world.
Yeah. And really thrive.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that because that's just the way I've thought.
Yeah.
My whole life.
I know. That's why I enjoy
Yeah.
talking to you for
Yeah.
that reason, because you've got a lot. You got good feedback on a lot of these, and now we're living within the algorithm that makes us happy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Our own algorithm. It's neat because you need to find those people to relate with, and it's not as common as you think. It's not as common for people to be willing to go take those risks to, because at times maybe it feels a little selfish, but it's okay to be a little selfish when you're trying to live the life you
Yeah.
want to live. And I have to remind myself that that's okay to do because you only get one.
Yeah, and I love talking to people. And when you dig into most people's stories, most of them have taken some kind of risk like that.
Yeah.
And it can seem like a smaller thing, but for them it was big.
Yeah.
And maybe the small thing was just moving to a different city, even
Yeah.
if it's only 20 miles away. But for some people, that's a very big one.
Yeah.
So I think I love talking to people and hearing their stories. I'm like, that's what we have in common.
Yeah.
But when you hear people's stories, there's always really interesting things down there in their stories.
Yeah, you can learn so much, especially about the ones that never took the risk. Those ones have always bothered me when I've met people that, people that I'd say
Mm,
mentors at work, and they'll tell me, they'll be really good at their job and they'll be kind of unhappy. And I'll ask them, be like, what do you
mm,
wish you would have done or what would fit your need?
mm.
And they'll be one to be like, I really wish I would have been a sound engineer and produced music for somebody or for movies. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and then it kind of breaks my heart. And I'm like, well, and then I'm normally the type of person I'm like, why don't you do it?
yeah.
You can learn how to do it nowadays. You can,
And there's people making movies right here in the Tri-Cities.
yeah,
There's stuff you can do. Yeah, and that's one thing I do tell people a lot is there's probably I don't feel like I've missed opportunities. I've taken most of those
how
opportunities.
fulfilling is that?
It's great. It
Yeah.
makes me feel very good about my life. And yeah, some of it's been hard and some of it's been weird and some of it's been difficult, but you don't get what you want. I feel pretty good about it. I feel like I've
Yeah.
done what I can in the world. I've helped people when I can. And that's important to me that you help other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to live a life.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's a good note to end on.
All right.
I think that's important. I could talk to you all for a long time. Um, but yeah, just thank you so much for everything.
And
I
thank you, David. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you've inspired me to spend more time paying attention to science fiction movies, and I've really gotten into the production quality of it and
Oh
seeing
yeah.
because like
Oh
you're playing that puzzle of how they're mixing
yeah.
human society
And
with.
CGI and all the other
Oh
things.
yeah,
Oh yeah, there's a lot going on.
it's cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.